charges. And secondly is the procedure used to increase those levies and charges, so to speak.
Yes.
And I must say this, I've always said that I am a member of UDA, and I am not leaving anytime soon. In fact, if anything, they will all leave and I will be left to close the door.
Okay.
But then,
I like the way Rajan says, okay.
I must.
Okay.
But I must say this. One, there is clearly lack of coordination in terms of how government communicates to its citizenry. Now, what you've read to me is a review because there was an initial Gazette notice revising those charges. Then when Kenyans raised questions, some government officials went ahead to say, oh, that is not what we meant. Oh, it should have gone like this. And it appears to me that even after we put Honorable Isaac Mwaura as government spokesman, it is either government officials are ignoring him or he is unable to perform and deliver as he should. Because he should, from a communication perspective, he should have seen what was likely to be the likely outcome of the Gazette notice and advise the powers that be accordingly before going to the public, as opposed to rushing to the public, then having to rewind your decision. You really look uncoordinated. And I must say that has been a huge problem, and it continues to be a big problem, and hopefully the government can sort that out. I don't know how they will sort out. So that speaks to the communication. Let me come to the procedure. Now, again, government is saying that we will revise these charges from January after having gone through public participation. Now, the Constitution is very clear. Actually, there are a lot of bills that have been passed, even in Parliament, that have been repealed by courts in Kenya, courtesy of lack of public participation. Again, from a communication perspective, someone should have advised Professor Kindiki that when you rush with this, because remember, people went to court on against the first document, and the court actually did issue an injunction and consolidated the petitions against that gazettement. So it tells you there is just from face value, there is a rush from every cabinet secretary to look like they are working and then to look like they, they say one thing today and tomorrow they are like, oh my God, it's like we goofed on that, let's retract. And therefore you can clearly see there is lack of coordination. And I feel certainly that in terms of public participation, the court still will intervene with regard to this. But let's speak now to the merit of the revision of the charges. And let us ask ourselves, one, why is government revising these charges? And when was the last time that these charges were actually revised?
The last part of that question should be, should they ever be revised?
Yes, that's true. Now, we must ask ourselves several questions. One is, where is government coming from? I told you when we started this discussion that when we got into a marriage, and a marriage is between a husband and a wife, but it appears that in this house, there is another man who's come into the house and is now calling the shots on behalf of the owner of the house. And that man, I have said, is IMF. And I have also said that whether we like it or not, because of the financial situation this country finds itself in, we might have to contend with IMF for some time. And it concerns me also particularly as a Kenyan, because I feel that it's like all economic advisors of the government have no script outside IMF. And therefore, this is part of the charges that IMF has recommended so that government does not go to it into their own taxes to pay for services. And so what they are trying to do is to bring the charges up to the market value so that government, you pay for the documents at market value. Okay? And that's why I'm saying, I get concerned myself.
Kindly repeat that. How is the market? What is the market value of ID?
No.
Yes,
I'm just saying. Look. I am not government.
Yes.
Okay.
So be very kind to me. I am just saying that unfortunately,
yes,
and it's unfortunate, but the way things are going in this country,
yes,
unfortunately, we have another man that has come into this marriage. Mm-hmm. And part of their recommendations, and they are not recommendations. You see, sometimes you imagine that they are recommending to you, but they are actually telling you to do it. They are not, for you to get your credit rating up to par, they are telling you must raise more taxes. You must include VAT in fuel to 16%. President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has been described as brilliant by Ragalo, mm-hmm, was pushed by IMF, and you remember that time in Parliament there was a lot of acrimony.
And they refused to go to 16%.
And people had said this thing you must put 16. IMF had told him you must put 16%. What did he do?
He didn't.
Because elections were coming, he compromised and put 8%, okay, and then went ahead and put a subsidy. Now the same IMF has come and said because of the dire situation that you are in and your debt is due in the foreseeable future, you need to implement a raft of changes. You must include the what was left 8% to become 16%, and VAT must be standardized across board. And that is what the government did. And I'm saying this on set. I have told you I am an ardent UDA and government supporter. And I am telling you that it concerns me deeply that the economic advisors do not appear to have any other idea except that which IMF subscribes. And I can tell you, this is not the last of what you are seeing in terms of charges. Across all government quarters, you might be aware even in counties like we were discussing the other day with Ragalo. Kiambu Hospital has raised surgery charges from 7,000, I think now it's up to 15,000. Mm-hmm. So it tells you across board, we are going to have government increasing costs of the services they render to the public in a bid to meet the market changes. Is it a good thing? The answer is no. But also equally, we must also ask ourselves, when we are taxed, and essentially the money goes into the consolidated fund, and when we come up with an annual budget, what exactly do we budget for? Because, Simba, you might be aware that most of the institutions that present their budgets to the National Assembly, even institutions say asking for 100 billion, they rarely get that. They will get, say, like 20 billion. Why? Because, in essence, the money is not enough.
Yes.
Now, if the Ministry of Interior and Coordination goes to Parliament and requests as part of their budget they need 200 billion, and the National Assembly approves for them, say 50 billion, there is a deficit of 150, correct? Now the question is this 150 had factored in loss of IDs, had factored in additional chiefs, had factored in a myriad of services offered by that ministry. So the question is this, since the money is not enough as budgeted for, then where are Kenyans likely to get those services that government is supposed to offer? And this is what I mean. When you lose an ID and you apply for an ID, if, for instance, you're charged 1,000, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, mm-hmm. If you're charged 1,000 yes. and you get your ID tomorrow,
yes.
vis-a-vis that when it is free, and the ministry doesn't have that budget, and you have to wait for 3 months, and you need that ID to process most of your things, which is better? And what is better for a Kenyan? You have seen that Kenyans apply for a good conduct and pay for it, and when one machine breaks down, they wait for up to 8 months or 6 months to get a certificate of good conduct. And therefore, we must have a sober discussion, and I say sober, devoid of political influence, and ask ourselves as Kenyans, what is it exactly that we want? And how exactly, because what is lacking in this country, what is prevailing now, you gave Ragala a lot of time. What is prevailing now is trust deficit. It is people don't trust their government. The legitimacy that Kibaki enjoyed when he came into power in 2002 is lacking with this government. In terms of people don't trust it. And why don't people trust it? Because one, the country was divided by half. The difference in presidential vote was only 200,000. So you still have millions of people who did not support this government. So the government sort of lacks legitimacy. Now, because people don't trust it, even when government does something in good faith, we do not have an opportunity to have a sober discussion and ask ourselves, these changes that government seeks to implement, how are they likely to benefit us as Kenyans? But also equally, the government is to blame because, as I said, they are very quick to implement things, and it appears like when they go for a meeting, everyone is itching to go out there and tell Kenyans what they have decided without actually thinking through what they are going to tell Kenyans.
I want us to go for a tiny breather. But once we come back, we're going to talk about this. That we hear you. And this is what majority of Kenyans are saying. But what justifies the addition? Or to what level are you supposed to add it by? Because I don't understand why you will say it is 100 today, and then tomorrow you say it's 1,000 shillings. Even, does it make business case? That's what majority of Kenyans are asking. Because you can't tell me then this morning that indeed you can remove. Now listen, there are some charges, Eric, that are moved from 200,000 to 1 million bob on a flat. Hata kama ni mkate bwana, watu wanasema iongezwe na hiyo pesa bwana. Hata mafuta iongezwe na hiyo pesa. That's what majority of Kenyans are asking this morning, is that yes, you want to add it, by how much? Once we come back here on the Morning Drift, we're going to talk about that with Ragalo and also touch on other issues.